Okay, hello. Welcome to our lunch study break. It is good to see you. It is November 3rd, 2021, and we're going to pick up where we left off last week and continue our conversation. So where we were last week was we began a conversation around traditional interpretations of tefillah and prayer. So to mark the yartzeit of Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, his first yartzeit was last week. We shared some of his teachings around the concept of tefillah. And of course, Rabbi Sacks, an Orthodox rabbi, shared with us the traditional approach of how Jews have understood tefillah and rabbinic interpretations for people who feel as if tefillah is hard to access. And we read and listened to some of his teachings. And so if you haven't had a chance to watch that, I just want to encourage you, always check out our YouTube page. This program, as well as all of our other good programs, are up on our YouTube page. So this week, what we want to do is answer that question without resorting to any rabbinic answers. And so the question that keeps coming up for me that we're going to address is, what do you do when you don't agree with the words in the prayer book? Hold on, I'm just trying to let people in here. Do you just say amen and move on? Force yourself to accept them as is? Do you close the book and put it aside? Or simply do you just, never walk through that door because you don't like what the prayer book has to say? So, okay, I'm going to do a co-host over here. So I'll have another co-host to allow me to admit people because I think we have a nice sized crowd here today. Okay, so last week we tried to address that in the traditional rabbinic fashion. And this week we are going to address it without reference to any rabbinic resources. And we are bringing in one of our favorite educators and artist, David Israel Katz. If you haven't had the chance to meet David yet, either through some of our alternative programs, whether it was Explore or his alternative high holiday offerings, or the People on the Path program that he did with Adam Lowy, I encourage you to watch that and to participate in that. All right, my wife texted me to adjust my camera and get the bookshelf out of the frame. Is that better, Alana? I hope so. Okay. So, my wife is the one who's concerned more about aesthetics than I am. All right, so that's been adjusted. So with David, a little about David, if you haven't had the chance to meet with him or pray with him, he is a singer, a composer. He's a performance artist who is deeply rooted in the Jewish community. His recent work has been drawing on biblical and prayer book texts, as well as on the non-verbal text of Jewish ritual. David studied composition and improvisation at Mills College, and he specialized in voice and movement and improvisation. He is the director of a project called Foreign Fire, and he organizes ensemble improvisations. He writes performance and art ritual scores, and he facilitates creative workshopping process. Haaretz described him as an uber performer and called his art ritual Thresh, which was praised by Jewish currents as an intense game you can lose yourself in. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so what interested me about David when I first came to San Francisco, when I first arrived at Congregation Beth Shalom, it was very clear to me that, a certain percentage of our community is very comfortable and feels outrageously moved by our ritual and by conservative prayer. And we've continued to maintain that tradition. But at the same point, there are other people associated, connected outside of our community who struggle with prayer. And so this question, what do I do when I don't connect to the liturgy? What do I do when I don't believe this? I mean, all this comes up all the time. And I have rabbinic answers, and those rabbinic answers are insufficient. In fact, if you look at our Torah itself, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, he is not able to provide all of the teachings that his people needs. In fact, there are other people who have other skills that Moses does not have. So for example, there's Aaron. Aaron can talk. Aaron can communicate. Aaron can play politics. Moses can't do any of those things, but those things need to happen. And then there is Bezalel. And Bezalel is the craftsperson. He is the artisan. He has the ability to bring into reality that which I guess most of us who don't have that skill with our hands like ourselves or with our voices are only able to imagine in our heart of hearts. Bezalel can manifest that with materials in the real world in a way that Moses can't even dream of. And so what I want to do is bring David into this conversation, and I brought him into our community to work with all age groups. He's made a particularly profound impact on our religious school kids, connecting with those kids who are 10, 11, 12 years old, who don't connect to the liturgy, finding the way into prayer for them. And I'm hopeful that he can do that for the rest of our community. And I know some of you got a little glimpse of it over the high holidays. So David, that is my introduction to you. That's all I have, by the way, for this session. I have the questions, which is what do you do? And then I have my rabbinic answers. But I said we're not going to resort to rabbinic answers. So unmute yourself. Let's unmute you. I'm going to take the spotlight off of me. And now it is on exclusively you. So welcome. Hello. How did I do with my introduction? Was that effective? Was that right?
Thank you, Rabbi, for this wonderful introduction. I feel excited and quite humbled to sit in front of all of you and try to talk about this because it's kind of interesting, even though I'm a singer. It's kind of like you'd think that a singer would feel just like totally comfortable also talking, but it's not the same thing. Singing and talking are not the same thing. Oh, please increase your volume. I can do that. Is this better?
Substantially.
Substantially better? Wonderful. Actually, I prepared a little bit of a song, a traditional song, to start off today. Let's see if I can make it happen. Oh yeah. It's a Latino song. Avreste abajur bijou, avré la tu ventana, por ver tu cara morena, al Dio dare mi alma, por ver tu cara morena, al Dio dare mi alma, por la tu puerta yo pasé, yo la topí cerrada, la levandura yo besé, como besar tu cara, la levandura yo besé. I got there. Como besar tu cara. All right. So I named this little presentation that I'm about to give you "Kissing the Lock." Thank you. And let's see here. I want to share with you first a couple of links. Think about it as a little bit of housekeeping. Here is a little Sefaria source sheet that you can refer to as we go along. And I will probably share other links later on too. So for now, well, here we are. Kissing the lock. So this discussion, as Rabbi Ain said, comes in response to this question that keeps coming up. What do I do if I do not believe in the liturgy I find in the prayer book? And I was trying to listen to that question Krishnamurti style, like he always says, uh, listen to the question, and let's find out what from listening to the question, what can we already understand? Maybe the answer is in there, and basically, we could ask in response to that question, what to do if I don't believe in the liturgy I find in the prayer book. Uh, why why do anything about it? Actually, after all, you can just you're free to close the book, put it aside. But for some reason, the question is what to do. So that question, what to do, implies that even though the reader of liturgy feels this disagreement, they still want to continue reading the text and to keep engaging with it. This need to do something about the disagreement suggests that the questioner is identifying themselves with the text in some way. They feel attached to it. They feel that it represents them. Otherwise, why not just leave the disagreement alone? Why would you? What would be the problem with, quote, not believing the liturgy? So I'd like to offer this, and this might not be so far actually, Rabbi Ain, from this rabbinic. Wasn't here last week, so I don't know what the rabbinic answers are. But I would imagine that the rabbinic answer could very much be, or one rabbinic answer could very much be, what if this Jewish liturgy is not there to be believed in or not believed in? What if our wise ancestors who have handed it down to us were not expecting us to simply say yes to every word or idea they wrote down? Because in meeting with this liturgical texts, it's practically impossible for anyone to feel complete agreement, to feel no friction. And I think this would be true for anyone, not just for secular liberal hipsters. I think this is actually probably the most traditional Orthodox practitioners would also feel some friction, and maybe a lot of friction sometimes. And I think that's part of the point of Jewish liturgy, and maybe even of liturgy as such, to actually place certain issues right in front of your face and challenge you to deal with them somehow. And maybe that's exactly what our wise ancestors intended for us when they formulated the fixed parts of our prayers and blessings. I'm thinking right now of two particularly loaded high voltage examples of that kind of friction. And if you are looking at the source sheet, this should be the first one there from Talmud Brachot 58b, where Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, when you see someone who has like spots on their skin, then you should say the blessing over the one who makes creatures different from each other, that is. And the Gemara raises a challenge: one who sees a person with black skin, a person with red skin, a person with albinism, an unusually tall and thin person, a dwarf, or one with warts, recites, "Blessed be the one who makes creatures different." But when you see an amputee, a blind person, a flat-headed person, a lame person, or one afflicted with boils or spotted people, then you recite, "Blessed be the true judge," and not the one who makes creatures different. So just like, I'm kind of like, I can't imagine something more conflicted culturally right now to bring from the Talmud from the time of the Talmud into our time right now, in terms of relationship to difference and physical difference and all that kind of stuff. What do you do with this? Is there anything you can do with this? Or think about Aleinu, which is the next source down. We are obligated to praise the Master of all, to give magnitude to the Shaper of creation for not making us as the peoples of all countries, and for not placing us as the tribes of all the earth, for not allotting us a part such as theirs, or a destiny such as all of their masses, that they bow down to vapor and vacuum and like total nonsense, and we pray to and they pray to a God who cannot deliver, but we kneel and bow down and prostrate to the face of the King of the kings of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. And I kept in my translation the patriarchal, masculine pronouns for the Creator, because I think it fits. And what do you do with all this? Like from our pluralist, progressive cultural stream that we're in. Really, there's no way out, but perhaps there are a few ways in, and I think that actually art and aesthetic work is really, for me, has been the way in. Because they've been transmitted in text form in prayer books, it's easy to think of all these liturgies as made of words. But the fact is that Jewish liturgy is and has been transmitted not just through writing, just through text, verbal text. It's actually been transmitted also through a whole array of nonverbal elements, sound, movement, all kinds of relational setups. To pray is not simply to say text, but to do text. That is, to perform it, to bring its potentials to realization, to live it out. If you've spent a lot of time in conventional synagogue practice, conventional synagogue services, as I know most of you probably have, then you are familiar with the vocal and choreographic elements, the call and response situations, the layered, albeit quite hinted theatrics of various ritual moments. For example, take the Kedusha section of Tfilat Sheva, the prayer proper of the Shabbat morning service. In this most potent liturgical moment, the congregation takes up the task of purifying and sanctifying in the perceptible world the name of oneness as it is sanctified by higher beings in the spiritual realms beyond human perception. You may be familiar with the turning side to side while chanting Ze El Ze, and the raising of the heels 3 times in sync with the chanting of Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And here's the next source down, if you're on that source sheet, has the text for this excerpt from the Kedusha section. And right under there, actually also the verses from Isaiah that this liturgy refers to. So to do text, to live it out, that is what poetry and magic are all about too. In writing or performing a poem, you're making something happen. You're setting events in motion. The poet's maxim, show, don't tell, holds in the liturgical setting too. When you bring it into the liturgical space from the merely literary space, then this maxim, show, don't tell, points to a kind of poetic shamanic practice, really, some kind of a magical doing. The Kedushat Hashem, the sanctifying the holy name liturgy, is derived, verbal and kinetic text alike, from this immensely powerful prophetic vision from Isaiah, which is a kind of cosmological icon that serves as a blueprint for one of Judaism's key liturgical / poetic / magical tasks, that is, to unify the divine name, to turn towards oneness from within this pile of shards that is the differentiated world. And the minimal choreography, Ze El Ze, Kadosh, 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 the sound and interaction that have survived of this ritual, of this icon in conventional practice, those can at best serve as a tiny little shorthand for something that's vastly more aesthetically powerful of a liturgical event. So this is really I suppose the crux of the way in that I would like to offer, is to actually follow in a path of unfolding this shorthand into what it can be, hopefully everything that it can be. Um, is someone saying something? I'm sorry. I'm not.
Well, I have a lot to say, but I'm biting my tongue, so I just want you to know that.
Sure. um, oh, babe, Ray, your prayer. I'm just looking at the chat a little bit, because I'm looking at my own notes, so I can't really see you while I do that.
Well, I mean, I guess,
Make a sound if you wanna, if anybody like
yeah.
this might be a time that maybe there is maybe a question, but I can also just move on.
Come on, let's hear a question. Come on. Come on, give me a question here. All right. So go on there. So you're giving the way in, but I'm still looking for your way in. Ellen has the question.
Oh, yes.
It's not really a question, but it's interesting to me, your first example about when you see an unusual person.
Right.
It may be politically correct not to want to say something, but I suspect for all of us, we have a reaction when that happens. And I think it's wonderful that our tradition gives us a way to remind ourselves, hey, that person is in the image of God.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that that would be one of my main points in this, is that, yeah, when you feel this this friction or this cultural dissonance with what you find, it kind of like it sets up this situation where you have to deal with this issue somehow. It doesn't give you really an answer for anything, but it kind of like sets something in motion, some kind of process in motion for you. This may be a good moment to recall that according to tradition, Jewish prayer may take any form. It can have sound or be silent. It can be verbal or non-verbal. It can include movement, thought, and it also may arise at any time, not only or necessarily at the traditional prescribed 3 times a day. The prayer book formulations that our rabbis handed down to us, the prescribed prayer services, the well-known movement and sound elements, those show only one set of possibilities in Jewish prayer, namely those possibilities that have gelled into conventional practice. Now, this traditional dual setup of keva and kavanah, of fixed text and momentary spontaneous intention, that dual setup, this traditional dual setup, already leaves the door open to dynamic expression and free experimentation. But as it is with such things, now it's up to us whether we choose to walk through that open door or not. So I'd like to give you a couple of examples of what stuff that I've done in attempts to walk through that door.
Judah has a question before you give the example.
Yes, please.
Judah and then Rabbi Tzvi.
So where we began with the blessing of, we see somebody different. The 2 types of people listed, I mean, in the second group, we say the blessing over when hearing somebody died. Yeah. And I think that makes it somehow a judgment that those type of people are not as good, or there's something negative about that. And, these are people who are just challenged.
Right. So the liturgy that way basically implies a certain judgment on the value of the life or the body of a person with a difference of some sort, and we here now have to deal with the fact that our ancestors made us aware of that judgment through formulating this text.
It's just interesting. I'm in a course now studying blessings, and somebody in the course, I don't know if you know Rabbi Lauren Tuchman, and she's this wonderful, wonderful rabbi who's been blind from birth. And I mean, she's so smart. And I always, empathize with her when we're studying about the blessings, talking about the blind people. That's all.
All right. So, Rabbi Tzvi Bar David, you have your hand up also.
Thank you, David. I'm learning so much already, and thank you, Dan, Rabbi Dan, for doing this. So, two things. One, I really love your phrase, show, don't tell, find a way in. And for me, and this is sort of the paid political plug, for me, the way in is sacred ecstatic music. Sacred ecstatic music in the broadest possible sense, rhythm, mantra in Hebrew. For me, in Arabic, our Sephardi brothers and sisters speak Arabic. Their word for God is Allah, just like their Arab brothers and sisters. And so for me, it's music in the fusional style of Sufi and Hasid meet in the tent of the beloved. And the purpose of the music is to get into, at least initially, a state of dual consciousness, an ecstatic state of dual consciousness that our Hasidic, and my specifically Hasidic ancestors on my mother's side called dveikut, except my mother would never say it that way. She'd say dveikus, right? Dveikut, which means cleaving to the beloved. So it's a dual state. And as a kid, I would faithfully go to shul with my parents' conservative synagogue in West LA, Friday night, Shabbat morning, the works. And I had a tremendous amount of trouble with the words, but I didn't have trouble with the music. The minute I started studying with the cantor at my synagogue, Leon Bennett of blessed memory, and began singing the service for the adults as a 16-year-old, all that nonsense cleared out of my head, and I was just in the zone from davening. Ashkenazi davening, but okay, just singing. So the paid political announcement is that the shul, Rabbi Dan, Rabbi Amanda Barrett are permitting me to run a little experiment. And the part of the experiment I want to just mention briefly here is 2 sacred ecstatic musical services. I mean oud player. I mean a very, very fine woman who is our Middle Eastern percussionist, and myself singing and little Hasidic and Sufi tales. The first of these 2 experimental services will be in the same slot as Daven, and the tagline for the service is called Rejoice, Simcha, Joy. And the first one will be Friday night, 6 p.m. at the shul, live, vaccinated and masked. On Friday, December the 3rd, and the second one will be January 7th, again, 6 p.m., subject to the synagogue's COVID protocol. Then there's some classes, but that's
we love Rabbi Tzvi, and we love what we're trying to do is to make a pluralistic environment in which we don't place aesthetic value judgments on one manner of prayer over another. And so what Rabbi Tzvi and David and Adam and Rabbi Russell have been doing is to provide, whether it's a daven or a rejoice, different opportunities for us to tap in. But what I'm interested here, David, and you have a quiet audience in front of you here. Some of these folks here, and I know who they are, and they know I'll call on them if I have to. They didn't love, so Rabbi Sacks went through the traditional liturgy. He talks about the Shema, the Psukei de Zimra, through the Shema, through the high point of the Amidah, the Kedusha, which you just cited, and then down the downslope, he speaks about this ritual reenactment of this process, and not everybody here loved his take on it, and they're being quiet. So perhaps someone here who does not resonate can speak to, you're providing a way in, but I want you to hear some of, I want you to hear some of the reasons why people don't want a way in, or why people are having a hard time finding it. Shira.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for coming a bit late. Adam was catching me up in the chat on some of what I missed, but I wanted to just bring something up that comes up for me a lot, which is that the words really matter, that we can interpret, and that is what we do. I mean, that's part of such a critical part of our maintaining who we are, right, over time, is continuing to interpret and consider these words. And who wrote them and why, and what do they mean to us today. And it matters that I'm using these same words that someone else who in so many ways really doesn't represent who I am or the world I want to live in. And that I choose, and that we choose to continue to do that just because it's what's been done. And then in fact, that decision in so many ways, even on its own, goes against so much of what I believe. And that I also, Svi, I related to what you were saying about praying. I went with my family as well, grew up in a conservative shul, went to an Orthodox Jewish day school, and still, even though I hate it, find this internal comfort with what I know, right? What I was raised on, these tunes, even the words, like I can't help myself, but actually be comforted and find this meaning still. And at the same time, what I know in so many areas of my life, especially now, is that it's so critical for me to be uncomfortable, right? Like whether it's addressing my racism, my discomfort with the spectrum of gender in our world that we're all, starting to identify with. I mean, how many examples can we give, right? Where this is an opportunity for us, and sad that we, so many of us haven't done it before, but Judaism is just another example for me. I actually have to say to myself, I need to be uncomfortable, right? And say that this is no longer, I can't just continue to say, well, this is what's comfortable. And so that's the way that I'm going to express myself and find my spirituality. And I have to say, like, wait a minute, like, I don't know if that's okay anymore with me. Like, I'm not sure. And that's really, I think, what I know is that in fact it isn't. And so what do I do? Like, I won't throw it out. I have no value judgments about others. Of course, this is just my journey. But that is really, it matters. These words that I choose to continue to say or not. I can't just give them away. But that's where I'm stuck.
Shira, I think this is exactly for you then. Maybe before I move on to examples, actually, then I'll just continue a little bit with talking, and but I will, because, okay, let's see here. So the first thing that I'd say, actually, Shira, in response directly to what you're saying, is that this struggle with, do I keep with it as it is, or do I change it, or do I not change it? Do I change myself? What is, all of this dynamic? It's kind of like a multi-pistoned motor that's happening, right? So many things so many elements are moving, and so many elements can give in or not. And I think it's really important to remember, and this would be one of my main points, that everything that we have received as conventional practice, as traditional practice, has at a certain point emerged. It didn't come from nowhere, and the things that we now look at as fixed, traditional, accepted, conventional, safe, and comforting, often, or not comforting, triggering, all of those things, all of those elements have emerged at a certain point through some kind of process, some kind of, living people have made them emerge. And I would argue that that element of emergence is that's the task, that's the liturgical task, that's the task of the subject meeting liturgy, like connect to that moment of emergence, take part in that emergence, in that process of emergence. And how do you do that?
Can I jump in here for 1 second here, David?
Yeah.
Shira, thank you for sharing. And I think you are expressing what so many other folks are expressing. And what I heard and what you just said, which was really powerful, is like maybe you're a little guilty about being as comfortable in that space as you are. and maybe you feel privileged that there's access to something that you have. I hadn't thought about that previously in the way that you framed it, but like almost embracing the tradition and allowing yourself to feel comfortable in that space feels somehow wrong in some way. That's why I really hear that. And that's very powerful. And you can understand, David, why people wouldn't want to walk into that space. They would want, we put up trigger warnings in our world these days, precisely so that people who are having such a tough time, don't have to be confronted with things that, might trigger them. I know Alana has her hand up, but I wanted to call on Corey because Corey also had his hand up earlier to follow up on Shira. Corey.
I wanted to try to form a thought, which is that I feel like prayer is very like exclusionary because it's come to a certain kind of language that we see. Most of us are probably trying to interface with English language. And for me, it's like very antiquated and it's very poetic and it speaks to this other like enchanted world that we imagine, like with a godhead and a god figure and a kingdom and a palace. And I can't imagine many people like wanting to interface with that. And I interface with it and I think, okay, well, can we just suspend this like majesty and understand that they're really trying to talk about palace in the abstract, the universe in the abstract, the galaxy in the abstract. And that is just so far reaching and so mind-blowing and miraculous. And anyone in their right mind would want to interface with that. They're alive, they love life, they love nature, they love sex, they love food, they love all these things. Then we're making blessings over all these things all the time. And we're just acknowledging that we live in this amazing universe. This language is so oppressive that we find in prayer, even calling it prayer is like really problematic to me. Like prayer, I can't imagine, like who's excited about prayer? Like if you look at the majority of people in the world that are like looking for meaning and open to different kinds of practices and spirituality and finding meaning in music and art, like who is thinking about the word prayer? Like I think very few people. I think that's a really exclusionary word and really frustrating for me. So I'm always wondering, and I've never really found an answer, why all these little building blocks of impulse and acknowledgement and emotion, why have they like arrived at this like antiquated language that we find in prayer books? It's like we tell babies like use their words because they don't have words yet and they're experiencing all these things and they finally learn language and learn how to express. And in languages other than English, they have so many more words for so many different emotions in between all the emotions that we kind of use categorically in English. And the way I understand Hebrew is like this very fluid thing, and every way that you flip and manipulate every Hebrew letter and every word has this expansive multiple meaning. I don't understand why there isn't more of that attracting people to prayer and acknowledgement of this thing that they're constantly in awe of anyway, always acknowledging miracles and always acknowledging some mysterious infinite creator. And yet it's always boxed into this like antiquated kingdom figure, masculinized, like palace, fairy tale majesty. And it really frustrates me.
It's disappointing. And I'm trying to interrupt. It feels like Corey beautifully expressed, Shira, Corey, Tzvi. I mean, really, I wanted this conversation to happen. So this is exactly the dialogue. And I'm really taking Corey. Corey seems disappointed in the tradition. And I think what Corey is speaking to is why I became a rabbi, which is I showed up in the shul, in the same shul that Tzvi and Shira grew up in. Okay, the same exact one that they grew up in. I showed up in that shul after 9/11, and I was sad that this was what was offered to me at that moment. And so I became a rabbi to create spaces like this and to bring in people like you. So David, can you answer? Do you have a response?
Yeah.
To what you've heard? Yeah.
I do have a response. My response is going to be nonverbal. I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to show you a video of a Shema ritual, the way that it was imagined and performed, so to speak, by Foreign Fire just about 3 years ago. Here we go. Let me give you just a tiny little bit of explanation before we move on with this. So
switch back to your mic. Switch back to your louder mic setting.
My louder mic setting? It's the same. Is this better?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. So each one of the 21 instruction cards in the set contains only one consonant or vowel from Shema Yisrael. Participants hold one card each, and they sing their assigned phoneme, cued by the wrestler's movements or by other participants' speech sounds. So in this way, the Shema text is pronounced out loud in a chain of fragmented consonants and vowels, while the choreography layers the Shema liturgy with the biblical image of Jacob wrestling with the angel, which is also the moment, of course, in which Jacob receives the name Israel. So basically, taking the liturgy and going deeply into the references some of the possible references, and taking those materials as a point of departure to make something for now, make something for right now, and in this case, not just something that may aesthetically work for right now, but also a kind of ritual that where there is randomness and emergence and an unknown element built into the way it's done, so that it'll always be different, actually.
David, it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting, one of the things to hear you struggle to explain what it is sort of reminds me of how ineffable what we're trying to accomplish actually is. Sometimes the frustration I think I have with you, David, is that, you have to explain what you're doing. But of course, how could you?
Exactly. Because the ritual moment is a generative moment. It's a living moment. It's a moment of emergence. It's a moment of encounter with and stepping into the unknown. It's a brush with the real, and as such, it's also a moment of freedom and agency. It's a moment of power and transformation. In other words, when you walk through this door that our wise ancestors have left open for us, it involves meeting the truth of your own freedom to shape your own life. And that's, I think, partly, that's a little bit how I understand Shira's comments from earlier, that there's actually, because meeting with that freedom is really difficult. I want to show just another example, one other example from Foreign Fire, and this is taking we took on the Shavuot custom of midnight Torah study, and made a piece that was based on Ruth's gleaning in the field and her final meeting with Boaz on the threshing floor, and it's lived out through sound, movement, and gesture in this way. If I can make this work. Hang on. Oh yeah. So this is called Thresh. And it's basically a reading of Ruth made for a Shavuot ritual, midnight Torah study situation. I'll play you just the last couple of minutes of it. Yeah, here too, the text is kind of like basically played out. All the pieces of paper on the floor hold little instructions that have you either stand and wait. Up my volume again. This is like my volume is all the way up. Can you hear me? Check, check.
It just happens when you change over to the video.
Oh, I see. Something about some kind of a technical thing that I don't understand, but I can speak. I can speak very closely here like that. Each one of those pieces of paper that were rustling on the floor, like the threshing floor, contains a little instruction. People come into the room and they open up a little ball of paper, and it says, find someone who's standing and sit at their feet and then follow their lead. And then other instructions say things like stand without moving until someone sits next to you, and then when they do, then take them by the hand and scream at their face as loud as you can, for example, or spread your arms and look them in the eye, or sing them a song from your childhood, very quietly in their ear. All of these different, very intimate interactions that hopefully, bring you close to something, bring you close to the unknown, and to a closeness with another person that maybe can somehow bring you closer to a feeling of what it would be like to be at the revelation at Sinai, or be Ruth at Boaz's feet that night, or be the person gleaning for whatever you can find in the field. Corey, I don't know if that's answering your, what you brought up exactly, but maybe it's giving some kind of a direction or some kind of a possibility.
So a few questions here. I have a note here from Alana, who had to step away. She said, prayer for me is pre-verbal. The word, and I think we know Alana is a poet. She says, the word can be limited just like the word poetry can be limiting and conjure up boring, anachronistic examples. But there is so much more poetry that is alive. I appreciate the way our community is open to these other avenues of expression. I'm excited by prayer. Let's go to Anna L. You have your hand up.
Okay, some of you must know I'm Alana's mom, and I would love Dan, even if he weren't married to Alana, because he's open and bringing in people like David to make things more accessible, more meaningful. I myself had years and years and years of conservative Jewish education. I went to Gratz, I taught Hebrew school, but it really wasn't until Jewish Renewal that I felt some of the prayer. And it really wasn't until this year when I did the ecstatic dance to liberation with the Kohenet that I really could feel, okay, you know, we learn prayer is requests, prayer is praise, prayer is asking for forgiveness. So we know these things, but do we feel them in our body? Do we live them? And I believe the world is constantly being created. And if that's so, then so is prayer. And so are the many, 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 many ways to get into prayer. And the last thing that I'll say about this, I have so much to say about, but I'll try to keep it short. This morning, I did my little creativity commune group. And right before that, I listened to 8 words of Qigong in Chinese with English transliteration that a rabbi, the one who's taking Marsha Prager's place for the next 2 months, wanted me to chant into when I made her headpiece, the Wear Your Prayer, which is a healing headpiece that I only recently found. The words of Miles Crossan in Kitavo talks about the heart to the head, light and healing. So, okay, all of this is all blended in. It dawned on me, maybe David can help with this, maybe see. I want to know in every language, what are these 8 lines of connection to the heaven and the earth and to losing the thoughts? And I'll send you this thing. Let's hear it in Arabic. Let's hear it in Spanish. Let's hear it in Japanese. Let's hear it in all of the languages. And wouldn't that be some song to sing? And then you don't need the whole prayer book as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not saying you should throw it out. I'm saying the Kohenet goes by it, and yet they bring in a whole bunch of their other stuff too. So now I think I might end up being a Kohenet so that you and I can have even more depth of conversation and debate.
Well, thank you. Shami, we call my mother-in-law Shami, which is instead of mom, which is shaman mom. So she is the Shami in our family. And thank you. And she's always, in a lot of ways, you know, when she met me, I was still maybe more conservative. You know what, when she met me, I would not have been able to do this. Okay. I was definitely more, you know, conservative when Anna L met me for the very first time when I was still dating Alana. Don, you've patiently had your hand raised for a while.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, I appreciate this discussion a whole lot. So there are many different ways to pray: the traditional, the wrestling videos, singing, silence, music, all the different ways. But the way I see this, the way I hear this is that, so you have groups of Jews, different places, praying their way. And that's really beautiful. I'm like, is there a way, if you brought everyone to a very large temple and everyone could pray in their own way, including all these ways, but communally, not, well, the people who want to dance are over here, the people who want to sing over here, the people who want to do it traditional over here, which still keeps us separate, I think, as Jews. I mean, it's beautiful, but there's still a separateness there. It's still, if you're doing it your way, you're going to definitely have some attitude probably about the other group, and you're doing it the right way and they're doing it the wrong way. So
absolutely, we're doing it the right way.
At Sinai, that my vision is, what I see is that all the people were praying, but it was different. I don't think it was one prayer. I think everybody was following their own impulse, like we're talking about here, and that at Sinai, all of these things were happening. There were wrestlers over here and singers over here and all that. So is it possible in a temple to get together and play with this?
So the answer is no, it's not possible. It is, there will always be difference, and my way will always be better than your way. And that's just, and what we do have is, or it would be like Burning Man, or it would be like a soup that's basically meaningless, and that where nobody finds value. So actually, the way is not to the impulse to make everyone happy and to just be happy with everyone is a little bit misguided. It's that the idea is to actually enjoy exactly this friction that Don, you and I right now are experiencing. I'm not agreeing with you, and the heat that this disagreement is generating, that is the heat that provides the energy for Jewish emergence, for the emergence of Jewish life, for the continual emergence of Jewish life. And that's exactly the heat that's if I were to sum up what I have to say to you guys, is the friction that you feel with liturgy, that's what generates the heat that's necessary for the emergence of Jewish life. And anything that you do to avoid that is choosing death instead. Our teacher Moses said, I'm giving to you these options, choose life. And choosing life, that means also to actually choose to stay with the struggle, enjoy exactly this predicament of disagreement, conflict. This is not everyone's happy. Some people are not happy. That's totally, that's what it's all about.
Why do you have to struggle? I mean, the wrestling video, because I thought I was laughing. I thought it was just insane. But if I were in the temple right now, and if I was allowed to pray the way I want to pray, and they were doing that, I could honestly say, far out, that is your expression. I get that was their expression. And I go, beautiful. I don't understand. I don't want to do it. But I get that you guys are praying, that you are touching your soul. So I can include that as a Jew. As a Jew, I will include that. So yeah. I've got no problem with it, even if I don't.
Nobody wants to be included by anyone. This is the thing. Well, yeah. So
I didn't mean it that way. I didn't. That's not political, but I'm not including. It's like, it's okay. I'm not going to fight you on it. I mean, I'm not putting that down. I'm not, putting them down. I'll include you. This
is what the lunch is, by the way. Don's here every week. This is what the lunch discussion is. We ask hard questions, David. We are open. This is part of it. I mean, we had the DA here. We disagreed with him. Yeah. We've had lots of people come here. We're open to disagreement, and we need more spaces where the heat can be dealt with, and that's why I let you and Don go, because where does that happen in the world where people can actually engage?
Yeah, so this is kind of the point, and then Don, I'm sorry. Part of the reason why I kind of went into this with you was exactly to kind of as a living example, right? That this is these liturgies, they bring up. They create relational situations between people. You deal with something like Aleinu. You deal with concepts of God as king. You deal with Kedusha. You deal with these things. When you go into these texts as a group, all kinds of situations rise up, and the idea is to live them out. Or at least that's what I can offer. As a way in, is to say, oh yeah, let's live these situations out.
And that takes us to 1 o'clock. So I want to thank David I want to thank everyone, Shira and Don and Ellen and Adam and Alana and Anael and Rabbi Tzvi and Judah and Corey and everybody else who was here, who was participating in the chat in the background. This is a conversation we're going to be continuing. We might continue it if people email me. If you want to continue it on this Wednesday forum, we can continue to do this. Send me a note and let me know. I feel it's a very productive conversation for our community to be happening, and it's essential, in my view, as we move into a new era in our world. This idea that we're going to return to shul and have it look like it looked pre-COVID is not correct. And so what we're going to have to do is figure out how to get authentic, genuine, and real prayer possible again. So I want to thank David, and I want to thank all of you for participating in this
Dan.
powerful discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.